Okay, I would like to speak today a little bit in Parshas Chayei Sarah, mainly two subjects. The first subject would be about the death of Sarah and a few different opinions why Sarah was in a different place. Why did Avraham have to come to eulogize Sarah? Why wasn't he there already? So a few different opinions, the Rashi's opinion, the Ramban's, and Malbim's opinion on it. So the Torah says, "Vayuchayei Sarah," and it was the life of Sarah, Me'ah shana ve'esrim shana ve'sheva shanim shnei chayei Sarah, 100 years and 20 years, and he says years at the end of each, esrim shana ve'sheva shanim, and 7 years. V'tama Sarah beKiryas Arba, and Sarah died in Kiryas Arba, he Chevron, which is Chevron, in the land of Canaan. Vayavai Avraham, and Avram came, the spoiled Sarah livkasa, to eulogize Sarah and to cry on her. So Rashi says over here that the reason that every year is mentioned, instead of saying Vayuchayei Sarah, the years of Sarah were 127 years. It says 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. The reason that it says years by itself, to tell you, it's telling you a comparison. 100 years and 20 years. No, 7 years. What do you mean? It's almost like, which one was she? So the answer is no. It's trying to tell you that that we're comparing all of them. We're putting them all on the same level. We're putting 100 years. So she was 100 years. She was like 20 years to sin, meaning that when you're 20 years, you only start getting punishment from Hashem, from Beis Shamala, meaning, okay, from here you get put on earth. Based in the courts could punish you earlier than that, but Hashem will only punish someone when he's 20 years old. That's when he's considered a adult and responsible, and then he'll get punished. He would get punished for what someone could get punished for what they do. But Sarah was like 20 years old to sin. She didn't sin, and she was 7 years in beauty, like she was in all the. That's how she was her whole life. That's what Rashi says, and it's in the Midrash, of course, comes from the Midrash, and then Rashi goes on and says, "Vayavai Avram came from where? Be'er Sheva." Now the reason he says that is because it says after Akeidah that Avram went to Be'er Sheva, so it seems like Avram was living in Be'er Sheva, and presumably Sarah was also living in Be'er Sheva. So the question is, why, if so, did Sarah come to Be'er Sheva? So why did Sarah die in Chevron? Okay, in Kiryas Arba, which is Chevron. So Rashi doesn't really explain. He just says what happened, which was Avram came from Be'er Sheva to Chevron. So let's go a little bit into the Ramban, explaining. First, he has an argument on Rashi, and so let's start with the Ramban over here. So the Ramban says, he brings Rashi, and he says that the Midrash didn't learn it from what Rashi says, from the place that Rashi says that he learned. Rashi says we learned from the word that says years, and between saying 100 and between saying 20 and then 7, it says each time 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. From there, from the extra language, we learn that we compare the years. So the Ramban says that's actually, for two reasons, that's not true. First of all, because for Avraham life, it also says it, and that's not a proof against it, because we could say the same for Avram. We could compare his years in greatness and good, but by Yishmael it also says the same thing. And Yishmael wasn't a tzaddik. He wasn't. We can't compare the first years to his end years, at least not in good, and certainly not in not for Shevach for sure. And if so, why would the Torah say it? But we can't compare, and especially when we say Yishmael did tshuva at the end of his days. So his early years weren't compared to his late years. They were different. Late years he did tshuva. Early years he was a sinner. So That's the Ramban's question. Another question, he says that this also doesn't make sense logically. When you divide it by years, it's to divide and say they're different. So you could, if you're already going to be darsh like this, learn this type of drasha, say the opposite. It says 100 years. So when she was 100 years, we're differentiating it from 20 years and from 7 years. And each of those years, there's something different about Sarah. That's what you would say. So rather, we don't do in any direction a drasha like that. But where did the Midrash learn it? Not from this part. The Mishnah, the Midrash learned it from what it says at the end. It concludes, after it says 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah, meaning it's putting them all together. Why did it have to add the years of the life of Sarah? We said beforehand, Vayu Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah were 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. That would be good enough. But then it said Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah, meaning it's putting them all in one bundle, meaning that they were the same. That's what the Ramban says. So then we continue on the pasuk later on. It says Vayavoy Avraham came lispod l'Sarah Vayavoy Avraham. To eulogize Sarah and to cry on her. So the Ramban says that Rashi says he came from Be'er Sheva, and this is not coming to tell you that he was living there, but Avram was the one that was out of proportion or not in the right place. He happened to be in Be'er Sheva at that time, even though they're living in Kiryas Arba. He went for a business deal, whatever it was, for whatever reason. Maybe he wanted to speak to Hashem over there, do something for Hashem. Whatever the case was, he heard about the death of Sarah, and therefore he came back from where he was at to cry, to eulogize and to cry on her. Then the Ramban brings the Chachamim's opinion that he came from Har HaMoriah, meaning that the Chachamim are understanding that he came right after Akeidah Yitzchak. That's what the point is from Har HaMoriah. And this is based also of another Midrash that Sarah died from the Akeidah Yitzchak, which actually the Rashi brings over there in Akeidah Yitzchak, and he says, Rashi brings not over there, he brings over here. He says that Sarah died, and this is what Rashi says, and I would like to explain because there are a few different opinions. She heard. Why did the death of Sarah come after the Akeidah Yitzchak? Because when Sarah heard about that Avram was going to sacrifice Yitzchak as a korban, bring him as an offering, that she heard that her son was going to be shechted, and almost didn't get shechted. Now, what does it mean almost didn't get shechted? He didn't get shechted then. So the Sivzei Chachamim over here says, Rashi should have said v'kimat shenishchat, and he almost got shechted. It could be this is how to explain it, that a messenger came from Har HaMoriah and told Sarah about the Akeidah, and he started telling her that he was about to get shechted. Ve'icher hamagid l'sayem devarav lamar la shenitzal v'lo nishchat, and he didn't. And v'kimat means he was about to say that he didn't get shechted. V'kimat, he almost got to saying that he didn't get shechted, but before that she died from parchanish mata, from shock she died. Now, I would say more simply, v'kimat shelo nishchat. It's a way of saying really that almost v'kimat shelo nishchat. So you could also say that it's v'kimat shenishchat, sagina or, meaning to say that he almost got shechted. V'kimat shelo nishchat really means that he almost got shechted, and she died from figuring out that thinking that she got shechted, that he was shechted, that Yitzchak was shechted. But Another way to explain it is the kim'at shelo nishchat, just by a little bit that he didn't get shecht. I mean, he got so close to being shecht, and the messenger continued. She heard also that he said, and he almost barely just got saved. And when she heard about him being saved, that shock, after the shock of thinking that he was dead, got killed, and then the shock of figuring out that of hearing that he didn't get killed, that caused her to die. Okay, this is the midrash. Now, simple pshat, not like that, and we'll see in the Ramban what simple pshat is, but this is the midrash, and it appears. And it appears from the Akeidah that Hashem commanded Avram while Avram was in Be'er Sheva, Ki Sham Hayadar v'Sham Chazar, because over there Avram lived and over there he returned. Ki Kain Katuv Betchilas Vayta Esha Be'er Sheva Vayikra Hashem B'Shem Hashem Kelolam, because therefore that's what it says at the beginning. He planted a tree in Be'er Sheva and he called out to the Hashem, the God of the world. And afterwards, after the return of Avram from the Akeidah, it says Avram lived in Eretz Plishtim Yamim Rabim. Well, no, before the Akeidah it still says, and Ve'yagar Avram Be'eretz Plishtim Yamim Rabim. V'sham nitzaval ba'Akeidah, and over there he was commanded on the Akeidah, v'alkein shahah b'derech shleisha yamim, and therefore it took him 3 days, because from Be'er Sheva to Har Moriah there's a distance. Be'er Sheva is the south. Yerushalayim is the center of Eretz Yisrael. Well, maybe not exactly center, but more central. Because this is the Eretz Plishtim that was far away from Yerushalayim. Chevron Bahar Yehuda, but Chevron is in the mountains of Yehuda. It's already very close. It wouldn't have took him 3 days. So this is the Ramban's opinion, that he was in Be'er Sheva and returned to Be'er Sheva, not like the Chachamim were saying in the Midrash. And when he returned, he went back to Be'er Sheva. How do we know? Like it says, Avram returned to his lads. When they got up and they went together to Be'er Sheva. Vayeshev Avram be'Be'er Sheva, and Avram sat in Be'er Sheva. To show you that he stayed over there and lived over there. And if so, Sarah didn't die that time, because logically it would make sense that Avram and Sarah didn't live in the same place, that Avram lived in Be'er Sheva and Sarah lived in Chevron. And Avram continues and adds that it appears that it brings proof. The Ramban continues and adds that and brings proof that Yitzchak himself was born in Be'er Sheva. Okay, and then he's going to bring how we'll explain it if we want to try to explain it based on the midrash. So, but according to the midrash, we have to say no. None of them lived in Be'er Sheva. They both lived in Chevron. Avram say nav ki la nigla lo hahar chemed elokim ad hayom shlishi. Why did it take him 3 days? The answer is Hashem didn't let him see it until 3 days. He looked around, was going around the same place. He wasn't traveling straight. He was going around different mountains, and he didn't find the mountain of Hashem, Har HaMoriah, until the 3rd day. So all the 2 days he was going around the areas of Yerushalayim. Wasn't the will of Hashem to show him. And Avram, after that, Akeidah didn't go back to his place, to Chevron, to where they lived. But he went back to Be'er Sheva. And if you ask, why didn't he go back to Be'er Sheva? Why didn't he go back to where he lived? And says al nisai v'sham shema b'mitasara uva umisha amar mahar Moriah ba umisha amar Be'er Sheva ba hakol tam echad. But and then he came from Be'er Sheva, and he when he heard right then he heard of Sarah's death. He came from Be'er Sheva for the death of Sarah, and meaning that because right after that Akeidah, according to this, Sarah was nifter, passed away. So therefore, he came straight from Be'er Sheva after thanking Hashem. He heard about the death of Sarah and went to eulogize her and to cry. So and then, of course, he went back to Be'er Sheva. And that's what it means. Avram lived in Be'er Sheva, meaning because Sarah died right at that situation. So he really only returned to, even though originally when he left Har Moriah, he was planning just thanking Hashem at Be'er Sheva and then returning to Chevron. But when he heard that Sarah died, right then when he heard Sarah died, so he went and he didn't stay in Chevron. He went back to Be'er Sheva, and therefore it says that he lived in Be'er Sheva, because that's factually correct, that he lived in Be'er Sheva right after the Akeidah, because he only went back to Chevron because Sarah died. And so it's interesting, because if Sarah wouldn't have died, he would have went to Chevron, but because Sarah died, he only went to Chevron to eulogize her and therefore came back. So yeah, and I think now the Ramban's going to explain it. According to this, what the pasuk says, that Avram said in Be'er Sheva, what it will mean is that after the Akeidah he went to Be'er Sheva, and from there he went to bury Sarah, and there, after burying, immediately he returned to Be'er Sheva and he settled down over there for years. And therefore the Torah just finished off that he lived in Be'er Sheva many years, even though it was after the story of Sarah. So now, and this is the opinion of all the Mefarshim. Now the Ramban brings this almost as if it's his opinion, but he actually doesn't hold like this. Not like what the Chacham say in the Midrash, and not what the most of the Mefarshim, the way the common Mefarshim explain it. Lefi da'ati ki ha'ela Sarah ohel sham omedes ve'amosat lefanah v'chein kasuv be'ol Yaakov ve'ol Le'al ve'ol shtei ha'ma'os v'nei Sarah meta be'ol asher la v'nichnas Avram ba'ol im chazad mer el ispor osa oshi elashon ve'yavot lamar she'itorer Avram lispod hazet ve'itchila asoisai. So Avram says, what does it mean he came to eulogize? I mean, he actually came into the tent of Sarah, because each one had their own tent. Avram had his own tent, and Sarah had her own tent, and he came to the tent of Sarah to eulogize her and all of that. And that's what it means over here, vayavoy. Or it could mean that he awakened himself. Like when you're coming to do something, you could call it vayavoy. He made a decision to do something, made a decision to eulogize Sarah. And according to this, I would assume what the Ramban holds is that he lived in Chevron, and like the other Mefarshim, that the death of Sarah was not after the Akeidah. He lived in Be'er Sheva many years, like the Torah says, after the Akeidah. But then he moved to Chevron, and over there Sarah died, and then Avram came to Sarah's tent to mourn for her. So that's just an interesting point. Now, this is not what I'm going to point out with the Malbim, but I want to point out another interesting thing. I mean, it is similar. You'll see, it's pretty interesting. Why did Sarah die in Chevron? So the Malbim is going to put a little bit of meaning into the about what's important about Chevron. So Vatama Sarah, Vagam Shavram Yeshava Be'er Sheva, even though, so according to the Malbim, Avram was living in Be'er Sheva, because it never says that he moved to Chevron. He lived in Be'er Sheva, like it says after Akeidah Yitzchak. But it happened to be that Sarah at the time of her death was at Chevron, for whatever reason. Not that she was living there, but she happened right at the time of her death that she was in Chevron. And this was a cause from Hashem. Why? Mitzad Gimel Talmim, for three reasons. Bekiryas Arba she muchenes likvuras hadalad zugos. Kiryas Arba, that is prepared for carrying for bearing the four zugas. I mean, Hashem had this place prepared for bearing the four pairs of avos, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah, and of course Adam, Harishon, and Chava. So Shehi Chevron, which is Chevron, Shesham, what does it mean, Chevron? Chevron, chibaron. Attachment. Why? Shesham yitchabru haruach im aguf. That over there, the ruach attaches with the body. The upper world and the lower world attaches. So there's a special connect. So there's a special place to bury them, which pretty interesting. We'd have to see according to the Malbim what he makes of it, but he certainly makes a special thing about Keres Arba and Chevron. There's a connection, a special connection to Hashem over there and all of that. Anyhow, I wanted to speak about about Eliezer getting a wife for Yitzchak, but we don't really have time now. We already used a lot of minutes, so yeah. Thank you for watching.